The characteristic hustle and bustle of Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport echoed throughout the terminal. The announcements blaring over the PA system, the rhythmic clatter of rolling suitcases, and the hum of countless conversations merged to create an atmosphere of both excitement and urgency. Amid this sea of travelers, a particularly striking and heartfelt scene unfolded at Gate C-23. A middle-aged man standing alongside a German shepherd with intelligent, watchful eyes. The man was Thomas, a former Marine with a rugged demeanor and a somber look in his eyes. His worn-out jacket and a faded baseball cap embroidered with Semper Fi, the iconic Marine Corps motto, were a testament to his years of service to his country. Yet it was Max, the German shepherd by his side, who truly captured the attention of passers-by. Max was more than just a dog. He was a loyal companion and an unsung hero in Thomas's life. Thomas was a seasoned Marine, having spent much of his life in far-off places, facing dangers few could imagine. But when he returned home, he realized that his toughest battle wasn't on the battlefield. It was finding peace within himself. Haunted by nightmares, anxiety, and lingering stress, each day presented a new challenge. Without Max, he wasn't sure he could have endured it all. Max was a specially trained service dog who helped Thomas through his darkest moments. Whenever Thomas felt overwhelmed by painful memories or a wave of panic, Max would gently nudge him, grounding him back to the present. The deep brown eyes of the German shepherd seemed to convey a silent message of reassurance. Thomas was never alone. On this particular day, Thomas and Max were preparing to board Flight 172 to Los Angeles, where Thomas would attend an important event advocating for veterans' rights. For Thomas, this trip wasn't just about traveling. It was a chance to rediscover his purpose and contribute to a cause close to his heart. Yet navigating the airport was always a daunting task for him. The crowded spaces, the loud noises, and the hurried movements of other travelers often left him feeling overwhelmed. But with Max by his side, Thomas knew he could push through. As they reached Gate C-23, Thomas knelt down to check Max's leash and gently petted the soft fur of his loyal companion, finding a moment of calm in the chaos. Max lifted his head, meeting Thomas's gaze with an expression that seemed to say, "I've got you." Thomas grabbed his ticket and approached the counter for boarding. Offering a polite smile, he handed over his ticket along with Max's service certification. This routine was one Thomas had gone through dozens of times without issue. But today, something felt different. The gate agent, a woman in her early 30s, furrowed her brow as she scrutinized the information on her tablet. "I'm sorry, sir, but there's an issue with your dog," the airline employee said hesitantly. Thomas froze, unease creeping into his chest. "An issue? Max is a certified service dog. Here's all the documentation," he replied, trying to keep his voice steady. The agent glanced at her screen, her voice lowering as if she didn't want others to overhear. "According to the airline's new policy, certain dog breeds are no longer allowed on flights, even if they are service animals." Her words hit Thomas like a punch to the gut. He felt his face flush with anger. He had followed all the rules, done everything by the book, only to be met with this baseless rejection. Max, sensing his owner's rising tension, gently pressed his head against Thomas's leg, offering a moment of calm. "Are you serious?" Thomas's tone grew firmer, though he kept his composure. "This isn't just a pet. Max is a certified service dog. Do you even understand what that means?" The agent pursed her lips, glancing at the growing line of passengers behind him. A few people had started to notice the exchange, some stopping to listen. Perhaps they recognized the Semper Fi cap and understood this wasn't just another traveler. "I'm just following policy, sir," the agent said, her voice faltering. Thomas took a deep breath. He didn't want to make a scene, but the injustice of the situation was impossible to ignore. This wasn't just about Max. It was about every veteran who had sacrificed so much and expected, at the very least, a modicum of respect in return. And so, what began as a routine encounter at the airport turned into the start of a story no one could have predicted. A story not just about one man's rights, but about compassion, fairness, and the power of standing up for what's right. The noise of the terminal seemed to fade as the conversation between Thomas and the airline employee grew more heated. Nearby passengers stopped what they were doing, their eyes drawn to the veteran and his loyal companion, Max. The air around Gate C-23 grew thick with tension as every gaze focused on Thomas. Are you telling me that Max isn't allowed to board this flight, even though I have all the proper legal documents? Thomas asked, his voice calm, but tinged with simmering frustration. The gate agent, visibly uneasy, struggled to maintain her professionalism. Yes, sir. The airline's new policy prohibits certain breeds, including service dogs, from flying. I truly apologize, but I don't have the authority to override this decision. Thomas clenched his jaw, his fists tightening at his sides. Max stood close, his warm brown eyes offering silent encouragement. Stay calm. We'll get through this. But how could Thomas stay calm? This wasn't just any flight. This was his chance to speak on behalf of veterans like himself, people trying to rebuild their lives one step at a time. You don't have the authority? Thomas's voice rose slightly, commanding attention. Then where are my rights? Where's my right to have the dog who has helped me survive every single day by my side? His voice was resolute now. Max isn't just a dog. He's a part of me. Thomas's words left many of the nearby passengers momentarily stunned. A well-dressed man in a suit stepped out of line, crossing his arms as he watched. A young mother holding her toddler paused, her worried eyes fixed on the unfolding scene. This is outrageous, an elderly man in a baseball cap whispered to his wife. Someone serves their whole life for this country, and this is how they're treated? Absolutely unacceptable. The atmosphere at Gate C-23 began to shift. The curious glances turned into visible indignation. A young man in the crowd pulled out his phone and started recording. People need to see this, he said, his voice low but loud enough for those nearby to hear. This can't be allowed to happen. Thomas glanced around, realizing he was no longer alone. The anger and frustration boiling inside him were now echoed in the silent support of strangers. But he knew that wasn't enough. He had to stand up, not just for himself, but for everyone like him. I fought to protect this country, Thomas said, his voice cracking with emotion. I didn't choose the pain I carry now, but I've done everything I can to overcome it. And now you're telling me I can't bring Max on this flight because of some stupid policy? His voice broke, his eyes welling up with tears, but he held firm, his resolve unshaken. Sensing his distress, Max pressed his head against Thomas's leg, offering quiet comfort. The small gesture calmed him slightly but did nothing to quell the growing frustration of the crowd. He's a service dog, an older woman in the crowd shouted, her voice full of indignation. It's his right to have him here. They can't deny that. The young man with the phone recording stepped forward, addressing the airline employee directly. Service dogs are protected by law. This is a violation of his legal rights. Do you understand that? The airline employee, visibly flustered, glanced around as if searching for backup. A supervisor appeared, stepping in to mediate. Sir, we understand your frustration, the supervisor said, his tone calm but rehearsed. However, the new policy does not allow exceptions. We can arrange another flight or issue a full refund. Thomas shook his head, his voice growing stronger, steadier than ever. Another flight? A refund? Do you really think that solves the problem? This isn't just about me. It's about everyone like me. Veterans, people with disabilities, people who just want to be treated fairly, with a little bit of respect. The crowd murmured in agreement. A young woman holding a child spoke up loudly. He's right. This isn't just one case. This policy needs to change. The supervisor began to fidget under the weight of the crowd's disapproval. He scanned the room, seemingly unsure how to handle the situation that was quickly spiraling out of control. Then, just as the tension reached a breaking point, a deep, commanding voice cut through the noise. What's going on here? All heads turned. Standing a few steps away was a tall young man with a familiar face. For a moment, the crowd seemed to hold its breath. Someone whispered, as if they couldn't believe their eyes. That's Barron Trump. The atmosphere at Gate C-23 shifted dramatically. All eyes turned to the young man, hope and anticipation evident on every face. Could his unexpected arrival change everything? The story had taken a decisive turn. The tension at Gate C-23 was palpable. Every gaze rested on the tall, composed young man who had just stepped forward. Barron Trump, a figure no one anticipated, stood firm, his calm yet piercing eyes signaling he was ready to take charge. His presence, exuding confidence and authority, silenced the bustling crowd almost immediately. "What's going on here?" Barron repeated, his voice clear and commanding, as if there was no need for a third request. The supervisor, who had previously seemed to maintain control, now appeared visibly uneasy. He looked at Barron, then at the expectant crowd, searching for words. "Sir, this is merely an issue with airline policy. We cannot allow this dog on the flight even though it has proper certification," he said, trying to steady his tone. Barron raised an eyebrow, his gaze shifting to Thomas and Max. After a brief pause, he spoke again, his words deliberate and firm. "This man is a Marine, a veteran who served this country, and this is his service dog, trained to help him cope with the aftermath of what he endured while protecting us. Are you telling me that your airline's policy takes precedence over federal law and basic human decency?" The crowd seemed to hold its breath, hanging on every word. A few nodded in agreement. An elderly man in the crowd whispered, "The kid's right. This isn't about policy, it's about morality." The supervisor, now visibly rattled by the growing pressure from the crowd and Barron's commanding presence, stumbled over his response. "We mean no disrespect to anyone," he said, his voice quivering, "but this is the airline's new policy. We're just following orders." Barron offered a faint smile, one that carried no hint of concession. "Policy? Policy never supersedes the law. According to the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, service dogs like Max are fully protected and have the right to accompany their handlers in any public space, including airplanes. If your airline chooses to violate this law, I can assure you that the consequences will not be in your favor." The crowd murmured in agreement, a quiet but powerful wave of support building behind Barron's words. His calm yet unyielding demeanor left no room for argument. The supervisor shifted uncomfortably, glancing at his colleagues as if searching for an escape route from the mounting pressure. Barron's words hit like a wake-up call. The supervisor's face turned pale, clearly realizing the situation was spiraling out of control. Meanwhile, Thomas, who had remained silent until now, looked at Barron with a mixture of surprise and gratitude. "Thank you," Thomas said, his voice low and filled with emotion. "You didn't have to do this, but I truly appreciate it." Barron turned to Thomas, his gaze softening. "I couldn't just stand by and let this happen, sir. If we don't stand up when we see something wrong, we're just part of the problem." Barron's words not only moved Thomas, but also inspired the crowd around them. A young woman holding her child called out, "He's right. We can't stay silent. This isn't just about him. It's about all of us." Voices of agreement rippled through the crowd. A middle-aged man began recording a video on his phone, speaking loudly. "People need to see this. This is how we should treat those who've sacrificed for our country." The supervisor, now unable to ignore the pressure from both the crowd and Barron, pulled out his radio and spoke urgently. "I need to speak with upper management immediately. This situation is getting out of hand." As he walked away, the crowd grew even more vocal. Those nearby started clapping, and a few shouted, "Do the right thing. Don't make them fight any harder." Thomas looked around, feeling the support and strength radiating from these strangers. He took a deep breath, his eyes glistening with tears of gratitude. "I've felt invisible before," he said, his voice shaking with emotion. "But today you all made me feel seen. Thank you, everyone." Barron stepped forward and placed a hand on Thomas's shoulder. "This isn't just about one person. This is about all of us. If we don't fight for each other, who will?" When the supervisor returned, his face was tense, but his demeanor had softened. He nodded at Thomas before speaking. "We've spoken with senior management. You and Max are cleared to board the flight. I sincerely apologize for what happened." The crowd erupted into cheers and applause, but Thomas raised his hand, signaling for silence. "This isn't just a victory for me," he said firmly. "I hope the airline takes a hard look at its policies so that no one else has to go through this." The applause resumed, louder this time, as Thomas and Max prepared to board the flight. Barron stayed for a moment, watching the crowd, before nodding to Thomas with a quiet smile. It was more than a resolution to an isolated incident. It was a reminder of the power of unity, compassion, and standing up for what's right. Barron nodded and added, "Exactly. This shouldn't be an exception. It needs to be the standard." The applause swelled again, louder and more fervent than before. An older woman in the crowd raised her voice, declaring, "This is how we treat those who've sacrificed for our country. They deserve our respect." As Thomas and Max passed through the gate, Thomas turned back, his eyes locking onto Barron. "You've done more than anyone could have asked. Thank you, Barron. Thank you for standing up for people like me." Barron offered a modest smile and replied, "It's what anyone should do." "Take care, Mr. Thomas." Thomas nodded, his gratitude shining through his eyes. Max, sensing the importance of the moment, wagged his tail gently as he walked beside his owner toward the plane. Yet what Thomas and Barron left behind wasn't just a personal victory. It was a spark of unity ignited at Gate C-23. The story of what happened would inspire many in the days to come. As Thomas and Max passed through the gate, it seemed like the story had come to an end. But in reality, it was only the beginning. What had unfolded at Gate C-23 wasn't just the recognition of a veteran's rights. It was an awakening of compassion and a spirit of solidarity among everyone present at the airport that day. The crowd, now fully aware of the significance of what they had witnessed, didn't immediately return to their individual routines. Instead, an unusual atmosphere lingered, one where people felt they had been part of something greater than themselves. Barron Trump remained at Gate C-23, watching as Thomas and Max disappeared down the jetway. His expression reflected not just relief at having helped someone, but also a determined resolve, a commitment to ensuring injustices like this would not happen again. As Thomas walked away, an older woman with a blue scarf approached Barron. Her voice was steady but carried the weight of a lifetime's wisdom. "Young man, I've never seen anyone your age do something like that. Thank you, not just for him, but for all of us." Barron gave her a humble smile and replied, "It's what needs to be done, ma'am. When we see something wrong, if we don't speak up, we're just part of the problem." Nearby, a middle-aged man in a suit started clapping, prompting a ripple of applause through the crowd. Strangers began talking to one another, no longer individuals rushing through their own separate journeys. A young mother, holding her son, spoke up loudly. "This is what we need to teach our children: fairness, compassion, and the courage to stand up for what's right." What had started as a moment of adversity became a symbol of collective strength. Gate C-23 wasn't just a place where people boarded a plane. It became a place where strangers united for justice, setting an example that would resonate far beyond the terminal. A young man with his phone camera still recording turned to Barron. "I've captured the whole thing. Do you mind if I share it? The world needs to see this." Barron nodded. "Share it, not for me, but for people like Mr. Thomas, those who deserve respect." Within hours, videos of the event spread like wildfire across social media. Hashtags such as "Charging Respect Our Veterans," "Shosh Service Dogs, Our Heroes," and "Stand for Justice" quickly began trending. Clips of Barron stepping in and delivering his powerful words struck a chord with millions. One Twitter user wrote, "This is the Barron Trump we need to know, a young man full of compassion and integrity. His actions are a lesson for us all." One particularly moving video showed Thomas thanking the crowd, saying, "You've made me feel like I'm no longer invisible. You've restored my faith that kindness still exists in this world." Comments poured in, filled with admiration and emotion. "He's not just a veteran, he's a hero, and Max is the most loyal friend anyone could have." Never underestimate the power of a united crowd. This is exactly what our society needs right now. As social media buzzed with the story, the airline faced mounting pressure. By that evening, the company's CEO released an official statement. "We deeply apologize to Mr. Thomas and everyone affected by today's incident. We are committed to reviewing our policies on service animals to ensure that such events never happen again." The announcement was widely celebrated as a victory, but Barron knew this was only the beginning. This is just the first step, he thought. It will take much more to change how society views veterans and people with unique challenges. The events at Gate C-23 became a catalyst for broader conversations about respect, compassion, and standing up for what's right. What began as a small moment of adversity transformed into a powerful movement, reminding everyone of the difference one voice and a united community can make. As the plane ascended into the sky, Thomas gazed out the window, his eyes following the vast blue expanse. Max lay quietly at his feet, his tail wagging faintly as if sensing his owner's relief. For the first time in what felt like forever, Thomas felt more than just a veteran wrestling with the scars of war. He felt seen, respected, and valued as a person. A few rows behind him, Barron sat quietly, his eyes focused ahead. A flight attendant leaned down and whispered, "Thank you for what you did back at the gate. Not everyone has the courage to do something like that." Barron gave a faint smile and replied, "We all have the power to do the right thing. It just starts with small acts." As the plane soared through the clouds, the story of Thomas, Max, and Barron didn't stay confined to Dallas-Fort Worth Airport. It became a spark that inspired millions worldwide, reminding everyone that in moments of hardship, compassion, and unity have the power to transform lives. Thomas and Max's story wasn't just an airport incident. It became a profound lesson in empathy, courage, and the strength of community. It showed that one small act, one voice standing up for what's right, can ripple outward into a wave of meaningful change. What can we learn from this story? Listen to those around you. Often the most powerful way to show compassion is to hear someone struggle. Act courageously against injustice. When you see something wrong, standing up might feel small in the moment, but can inspire a much larger impact. Respect everyone. Every individual deserves dignity, no matter their past or circumstances. Wherever you are, whoever you are, you can make a difference if you're willing to speak up. Now, we'd love to hear from you. If you were at the airport that day, what would you have done? Have you ever witnessed or been part of an act of standing up for what's right? Share your story in the comments below. We believe that every story has the potential to inspire someone else. If this story touched your heart, hit the like button to help spread the message of compassion and justice. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more meaningful stories. Stories that bring hope, inspire change, and remind us all of life's true values. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Together, let's create a better world, starting with the smallest of actions. Star.